All right, welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about lights on weapons. We get tons of questions online and in store about using a light for home defense. Where should you mount it? What kind of gun should you mount it on? Is there too much light? You know, that sort of stuff. Is there a particular brand everyone uses? I don't know much about this stuff. That's why I got Phil with me today. Phil, how's it going, man?
It's going really well.
All right, so lights. Where do you mount your light on your rifle for home defense? You use a rifle for home defense, correct?
I do. I prefer a rifle for home defense, and I learned a lot of the lessons and kind of the backstory of where I picked up my light knowledge, if you will. Working law enforcement work, military, started off military work, but then working a lot of law enforcement and the tactical side of law enforcement. Weapon light was something that I used every single time. It was a constant use, so I got a lot of chance. My opinions on weapons lights have really evolved. So with the rifle, and I do favor the rifle for a home defense role and general defensive role. If I get the choice in a fight, I'm taking the rifle. And what I've kind of refined into is a preferred location of mount. It comes down to really personal preference. Everybody is different, but I prefer 12 o'clock. What I teach when I teach low light rifle and we talk about placement, I prefer anything in the upper half of the carbine, and I like it in either the 11, 12, or 1 o'clock positions. Personally, I run mine at that 12 o'clock. Gives me great lateral light, both strong side and support side. I don't have a lot of splash coming back if I'm shooting from cover, and I get a great, good inline light and bore directly in line, and that's my preferred setup.
You brought up an interesting point. You're running an Inforce on top, 500 lumen. Some might say that's too much light for inside. What do you think about that concept?
I don't know that I haven't found in light technology that's out right now. I have never ever and been running lights all the way from when they were 65 lumen incandescent SureFires that we thought were
the old lanterns
with the old Jimmy Jam. I mean, they were the greatest thing. I mean, that's what our weapon mounted lights were. 65 lumen. Then we had some upgrade kits that bumped them to the blinding 110 lumen, which now is laughable. You can get push lights that you put on your key ring that are brighter than that.
Yeah.
I have never ever found myself saying, "Man, I really wish I had less light in this situation." Okay. Just the opposite. So I don't buy, and we'll show you a little bit about that whole idea of overwash and splash that you get off the white walls. That's a great clean static environment, but most of the places that we're at, we don't have clean white walls. There are things in the walls, there are furniture, there's a lot of things that absorb that light, and it's never been a problem. And I can't think of a single instance where I had lit something up or lit someone up and was so blinded by my own light that it caused any problems. The closest thing to a phenomenon that you will find in that, particularly running some kind of a dot optic, if you don't have your optics turned up properly when you're getting ready to go in or you're using that, you can wash out your dot to the point where it's bright enough where you don't see. But I've never found too much right now, and pretty much every light you're going to see in the market today that fits, about the max you're going to get out of that is 1,000 lumen. In some of the SureFire P3s are running 1,000. Some of the different Chinese lights, some of the Nightcore lights, some of the others, they're running 1,000 plus lumen. And they're not too much. They're perfect. I mean, they're a great amount of light. It's almost, I haven't found the too much of a good thing theory when it comes to light.
Okay, cool. And to the other crowd that says, Phil, I don't need a light on my home defense gun. I can just flip on a light switch, or I don't really need that. I know my home well enough. What do you say to that crowd?
Well, it comes down to identifying, and that comes back to the point of enough light and being able to see and identify your threat and then put shots on it. And also to use the light and work around the light. I have seen examples where lights have been a useful distraction tool for a very short amount of time. Light manufacturers will tell you how the blinding power of the light and the disorienting, and you see some of the fancy strobe features and modes that get put into lights. It's been my experience, my real experience, that doesn't mean a lot, but it does provide you some brief distraction, and they really are a tool to enhance your situational awareness and give you more info.
Sure.
And it's really amazing how fast areas get pretty dark really fast. Even if you flip a light switch on in the middle of the night in your own home, you've got nooks and crannies and behind the couch and different areas. Not that you may or may not be searching those areas.
Right.
A little bit of a different mission and a little bit of a different purpose that a lot of people have in home defense, but a good white light really is something that's very important to identify to avoid any chance of mistaken shootings and limit that. The worst thing you can do is shoot at the shape in the middle of the night. You don't know who that is, what that is.
Right.
And unfortunately, there have been tragedies nationwide that have occurred when we just shoot at shapes.
Right. Let's talk brands a little bit. You have an Inforce on your rifle. You got a SureFire on your pistol. Are those the top two in your mind as far as a home defense light or a light to use in a self-defense situation?
I think there's a lot of great lights. You know, light technology has really leaped and advanced forward. I really like the simplicity. What I look for in any of my weapons-mounted lights, and particularly we'll start off with my rifle, I look for lights, actually in both rifle and handgun. I look for a light that I can operate in as close to my normal shooting stance as I possibly can. Okay. SureFire and Inforce both do that really, really well. Any of your light manufacturers that have pressure switches, you can pretty much set them up to a natural shooting stance and be able to run them wherever you need to run them. However, in my experience, pressure switches are great when they work, but it's just another link in the chain, and they can go wrong. I've used a pressure switch on working guns for a lot of years, and I had great success with them, and I've also seen them fail like any other, you know, electronic component. So I do like Inforce, I like SureFire. There are a lot of great light manufacturers out there. These two provide me good, simple, they provide me ambidextrous operation, simple operation, and I've found both of these two to be robust. Streamlight is another good brand that makes some great handgun mounted lights, and you can use them dual purpose. I also don't necessarily like the locking down of unitaskers. Before I switched over to the Inforce, I was running an identical light to my handgun. I was running a SureFire X300 Ultra at 500 lumen. The Inforce, which I prefer the switching mechanism for my rifle, when they came out with their WMXL, I think that's the product.
That is the correct one.
Their 500 lumen light, I switched over to that. Great light, lightweight, and simple ambidextrous operation. Even simpler, I found, than the X300s.
Okay. I wake up in the middle of the night, I hear glass breaking, door breaks open, whatever. Am I flipping my light on immediately and shining that thing everywhere, or am I waiting, or what's the procedure there?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things when you start talking about using a weapon-mounted light, using any light, whether it's handheld or weapon-mounted, we've obviously identified all kinds of advantages to having a weapon-mounted light. Sure. It frees up a hand. It's a lot easier. You do lose one little bit of flexibility with a weapon-mounted light over handheld, in that your light is tied to the direction of your firearm and where you're pointing there. But you know, one of the biggest problems I see is people that don't understand the right amount of light to use, either too little or too much. So if you go too much light and you light on, you know, you light your light up and you lock it on, or you tighten that bezel down, or you do whatever you do to turn your light on and leave it on. Too much light allows you to watch the shadows as you change angles. Everything is about angles, even in your own home. And you can easily track and understand the exact moment you're going to come around a corner if you go way too heavy on the light. Big mistake that I see a lot of folks make. The other side of the coin is people that believe that they have to use the light very, very sparingly and as little as they possibly can. There's a good sweet spot in the middle, and you got to kind of get a feel for that and understand. You need to be able to process information and be able to do that, but you need to use your light in an intermittent, we call it bumping, you can kind of call it strobing. It's not utilizing a mechanical strobe feature of the light, but bumping the light in intermittent bursts and moving the light around to try to break up where you're coming from, disorient and confuse. And it can get pretty confusing if you're doing it properly, where or when that light may present itself, but you still need to use the light enough to be able to identify any potential threats and see what you need to see. If you think you're just going to slink around in the dark and use your light when you see a threat, well, that may not work out if you don't perceive that threat. Now, under the home invasion, the home defense scenario, a lot of times we're not out like quietly looking for something, but there are plenty of folks out there who are tasked with doing that, whether it's law enforcement or military. And in the case of a home invasion, it may be, you may know where that threat's coming the whole time, and that doesn't mean that you don't have to use the light. You can hit them with the light, and then it becomes how you use your light after you've identified a potential unknown or a potential threat, and that's a totally different thing as well.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Okay, we're going to take a quick look at some of the different lights that we used on the range, different lumens, how they splash, and just kind of give you guys a little bit of an idea of how these lights work in complete darkness. So check it out.
Okay, here we go. 200 lumen directly on the threat. Very easy to pick up and identify. Now 200 lumen at a 45 down angle. Off angles. 500 lumen, 500 lumen directly on the thread. Now 500 lumen at a 45 down angle. Off angles now. 45 to the left, sweeping across. Thousand lumen now, 1,000 lumen light. .45 down angle. Off angle, left to right.
Okay, so now, further in the process, I've had someone break into my home. I've found them, and they are now a threat to me and my family. What is my next objective with the light on my weapon?
Yeah, there's really two schools of thought on this, and that is one where you use, again, back to using the light as sparingly as you can, and you use a light, you identify, you engage that threat, if appropriate, with, you know, in many training systems or methodologies, you engage it with a set number of rounds, and then you immediately turn the light off, you move in darkness, and then reassess, whether that means turning the light on or seeing if you need to reassess. That's one school of thought. That's very sparing. That's that shoot, light on, shoot, light off, move, light on again. Very sporadic. What I found in practical application is that doesn't always work out real effectively. I'm more of a fights on, lights on kind of methodology. So when I'm in that instance, and even if it's not all the way up to an actual fight, I'm not engaging a threat, but I have that person, that unknown, and I don't know if I yet have the authorization. Let's take out the home defense scenario just briefly, and let's say that and this can go for handgun, this can go for rifle. You know, we've got great examples of home defense setups or large carry setups, but weapons mounted lights can be and are ever increasingly popular, even on concealed carry pieces. So you can carry a weapons mounted light even on a concealed carry piece. So it could be anywhere where you're using this light.
Absolutely.
So once that threat has been identified, and if you use your light to do so, I want to keep the maximum amount of information coming into my primary sensory input center, which is my vision. And if I don't use the light, I can't see what that person's doing. And you know, that light on, shoot, light off, move works really well on a static range when I know where that cardboard or paper
It's going to be there
target.
every single time.
It's not moving.
Right.
You know, it's not thinking. It doesn't get a vote. But in a real encounter with the folks moving, and whether it's a lethal threat or not, whatever kind of threat you're dealing with an unknown. And if you are dealing and you're actively engaging, you got to know that you're being effective. Because again, we've hit so many videos where we've talked about the fact that this isn't the press the trigger and they go flying through a plate glass window,
right.
You know, Arnie Schwarzenegger style, right. A la Commando. It just doesn't work. You know, unless you have your room broom, the 12 gauge shotgun.
Oh yeah, then you just clear the whole thing.
You vaporize everybody. But if you're using a rifle, I mean, it just doesn't work that way.
All right. Also, Phil, it seems to me that once you've engaged in that fight and rounds are starting to be exchanged, it seems easier for my mind just to leave that light on. I don't have to worry about the thinking of, okay, now I switch it on, now I switch it off. Do I move now? Do I not move it on now? It's just the light's on, and you're processing information. Is that a correct way of thinking about it?
To me, it's about the processing of information. I got to know what's going on, and it's not that static, pretty, you know. Things are moving and they're happening really fast, and you're moving. Your adversary's, you know, either moving if you haven't put them down, or even if they are, they may still be moving. They may be dropping behind a sofa, jumping into a room, falling into a hall. They may be turning and burning, and you've put good hits on target, but they've turned and run. You got to be able to continue to visually process what's going on. The biggest thing, and when you talk about, you know, even a scan process, you think about scan processes, we talk about the first thing you need to know is, are you still in a fight? And if you're really in a low light and a darkened environment, it's tough if you don't have that light. So turning your light off is difficult. And the other thing that's a reality, if you're in any kind of a structure, I don't care. You don't need to be in a structure overseas. It's been my experience, even in the United States, you start firing off rounds inside structures here, there's enough dust and pet dander and, you know, whatever kind of funk is in your home and in every home, even clean homes. You touch some rounds off, and you have gun smoke that's now in the room. You have all kinds of dust that's been kicked up,
drywall,
and Yeah, and on top of all the things that you may have broken with any rounds that you fired, it gets pretty hazy really, really fast. So another thing that comes in with that light is being able to cut through that haze. Almost kind of works like headlights in fog. It gets pretty difficult. So the way you're going to combat that is movement. Well, you don't know where you're going. You don't know where your threat's going if you don't have that visual input. And if it's dark, you need that light or you don't get that visual input.
Cool. All right, guys. Well, there you have it. Weapon-mounted lights. Thanks, Phill, for coming out and sharing all your experiences. If you guys have any questions about this video, by all means, leave them in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And we'll catch you guys on the next one.